All right. So what we're going to talk about today, first, can everybody hear me? Well, you good with that?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, good. All right, so what we're going to talk about today is creating an MVP. Does anybody remember what an MVP stands for? MVP, not most valuable player.
Minimum viable product?
Yes, thank you, Alex. Minimum viable product. I don't know if you just Googled that, but if you did, it doesn't matter. Thank you for answering. Yes, minimum viable product. And this is what we talk about in entrepreneurship a lot. And this is what we try and have our entrepreneurs here at FGCU focus on pretty heavily in the beginning of their journey, because it allows you to test the product with very little resources applied to it, right? So you're not investing a lot of time, you're not investing a lot of energy, you're not investing a lot of money. What you're doing is building a bare bones model of your product or service, and you're going out and asking people what they think of it, right? So it's the quickest and easiest way to test your product or service or your idea, your solution to the problem, okay? So the old way, and this is, we're getting a lot of new participants here. Good. So the old way, oh good, see? Just for the record, in case nobody's looking at the chat, Alex did not Google it. She just knew it. So good for you. Good. The old way was identify an entire feature set, deliver it to an engineer, build it. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the Field of Dreams, the movie with Kevin Costner, but we don't live in a world where if you build it, they will come, right? This is the old way they used to teach us in business school, where you build a business plan. I was literally told by professors that, like my friends and I, we would come up with tons of ideas. And I remember emailing professors at like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And I was like, man, I can't shake it. I think this is a really good idea. Write a business plan, write a business plan, write a business plan, right? And unfortunately, business plans, the way they were taught to us, and we had our blinders on and we believed in this process, right? So we would sit down and for like a week, we would flesh out a business plan without ever testing if the idea was even worth it, right? So we invested so much time and energy into that. And by the end of it, most of what we've written was irrelevant, right? Because none of us pursued any of them. I still think that one of my ideas, which I actually heard they were doing now, was a killer, right? The acronym, and I'm just gonna pitch it to you guys real quick and give me your feedback. Let me see what you think. The acronym was ACT, A-C-T, right? And it stood for American Classic Theater. And it was bunch of small theaters across the United States is how I envisioned it. Like 3 or 4 screens showing old, like rehabilitated films from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, right? So you could go pay a small amount, like $4 or $5, and you could go and see one of the classics on a big screen. But now they're doing it all over the place. So I missed my chance. I could have been a billionaire. That's the way it goes, though. Spend too much time writing a business plan and not enough time actually testing the idea. All right, so the new way, right? The new way we do it is we sort of follow right here Amelia Earhart's advice. The most effective way to do it is to do it, right? We learn, measure, build, right? We don't build until we go out and we test the product first. Our MVP is not a finished product. Our MVP is just a way to test the waters to see if there's any demand for it. Okay, that's why it's so important to understand how to build one. So this is the customer discovery loop. And remember, this is what we covered in that section where we talked about understanding who your target audience is and building for a market of zero with the hamster vest and all of that, right? But this is how it was taught to us. We start and build, we move to measure, we move to learn, and then we circle back around. Unfortunately, that's not the way it works, right? And nor is it the most efficient way to use this model. We start in reverse order, right? We start with learn, we move to measure, and then we work to build. we've talked about learning and measuring, right? So how do we complete the loop with our original little MVP, right? It should be designed to learn as much as possible with the least amount of effort, right? And they differ from prototypes, and this is an arbitrary sort of definition because you'll call things prototypes and you'll call things MVPs. We'll talk about prototyping your apps and different things. So the words are used basically interchangeably. But definitionally, you just have to understand that prototypes stay in-house, MVPs are meant to be shown to customers, but in most cases, both are used as terms to describe a way for you to get a very simple version of whatever you're building in front of a customer, okay? But for the sake of the exam, just understand that MVPs differ from prototypes and that they're meant to be shown to customers, and prototypes typically stay in-house with your development team and within the management and development team, okay? So I want to just talk, well, we'll talk about it in a minute, but the first thing that we'll discuss is building, right? So do you need to start with surveys, or can an MVP be created quickly? It depends on your skill set too, right? So one of the interesting things that I talked about with a class last night, and I don't know how familiar you all are with these types of softwares, but Bubble, Airtable, we've talked about Marvel app, we've talked about Wix, right? What was the one that was used in New York? I thought it was something called, something like that. Well, and once I find it, I'll send it over to you. I can't think of the name right now. But all of these are what we call no code, right? You don't need to know code, and you don't need to hire engineers to make your idea a reality, right? This company focuses on web applications, right? So you can just drag and drop and build an effective site or business around or using Bubble software without knowing how to code. Same thing with Airtable, building databases, collecting people's information, being able to pull that information in effective ways, right? You don't have to learn how to code. You can literally manage your business with this software without learning any sort of computer language. Same thing with Marvel app. You can prototype out an application without knowing how to code, and you can build websites without knowing how to code, right? This kind of software has allowed New York City to literally get their COVID-19 website up, their like emergency site that they needed for the city, in less than 2 days. They built a whole site, right, in less than 2 days, and they applied that. They then made that model public, and it's being applied in other cities, getting websites up in 48 to 72 hours, right? So it allows you to move much more quickly without learning, without taking years and years and years to develop this skill of learning computer languages or learning how to code, right? So if you're creating an MVP, this is like your gold, right? You can get in here, learn the software. It might take you a little bit to learn the software, but once you do, you can build a fully functioning prototype, right? In a relatively short period of time, okay? So I would actually, let me, one of my colleagues sent me, here's the site, right? So Next Frontier and all of this is a world without code. So, oh, it's uncorked, that's what it is, there we go. How much does what cost, Megan? These sites are free, right? So Eric, Dr. Arsenault, built a database, a site that allows us to communicate student needs and things like that with our administration, right? And it was 100% free. He did it himself, and it's a fully functioning site that updates in real time, right? So you can pay for advanced plans, right? So if we go to pricing for something like Bubble, yep, free to start, pay as you grow. So this is free. You can create your core platform features. Then you start to white label, means you brand it your own brand, right? You create your custom domain, and then it goes up based off of how much usage you're needing out of it, right? So it really helps to get something off the ground, and as you grow, you can then upgrade your account and pay per month, right? But this is the site I was. Oops. This is the site I was talking about. So enterprise application development reimagined. This is your this is a way, no-code application that allows large enterprises to build software faster, right? This is where you can go to start building things yourself without having to contract or pay engineers or learn a skill yourself, okay? And this is an interesting article. I'll go ahead and just paste that in the chat in case anybody wants to check it out. All right, so that's a little bit of a tangent, but it's important to understand because in this stage of the MVP, right, where you're at an MVP, you can start building it regardless of your skill set, right? It'll take a little bit of time to learn these technologies, but it might take a week as opposed to, if you really devote the time, as opposed to years and years to learn how to, you know, code in Python or PHP or something like that, right? So it's really important to understand those different resources that exist for you, right? You can start with surveys just to get feedback, to understand what people are looking for. It's really important to start that way so you at least understand what the problems are people are looking to solve or people are looking to have solved, right? What would the minimum viable product look like, right? And how would it work? This is what you need to understand. Is it just what we call like a Wizard of Oz, right? And that has to do with the idea that I'm sure all of you have seen the Wizard of Oz, but the wizard is ultimately just some dude behind a curtain who's projecting himself as this all-powerful, all-knowing being, right? And it's a sleight of hand. So what you can do is build a site that looks like everything is functioning, and then most of what is happening behind the scenes and you're doing it. So a good example of that is Zappos, right? Zappos is the shoe seller, and I think we may have sort of brushed over this in a previous class, but they sold for over $1 billion to Amazon, right? But when they started, right, they had a site and people would buy shoes, and obviously if you do that, you think, wow, this is a process, everything's automated, it all looks clean. But there was literally somebody behind the scenes, as if I bought a pair of Jordans, they would run to finish line, buy the Jordans, and then ship them to me, right? All they had to do was prove that people would buy shoes online, right? And the quickest way to do that was by building this Wizard of Oz MVP, right? So this tends to happen where we get into this, this idea that when we pitch these MVPs to students, like, okay, like how are we gonna build something simple? It gets uberly complicated, right? But really hone in on how we can do something as cheaply and simply as possible to try and prove if the problem exists or if our solution is even worth pursuing, right? Find My Bus Technologies from Chicago, a group of high school students. They had to build an MVP to prove if an app that showed you where your bus was would be worth it. How did they do it? They just followed people around and texted their friends and parents, right? It cost them nothing, but they proved the concept. And that's what we're talking about with MVPs, right? And then finally, what materials or knowledge or skill set, like would you need to begin building? And most of that you can cultivate as you go if you're learning with this no-code software. So MVP examples, right? Do an automated process manually with little or no hardware. So how much do you think people would pay to have their laundry folded for them? Anybody?
A lot.
Really? How many of you would pay to have people fold your laundry for you?
I mean, I don't like doing it, but I don't have enough money to pay someone to do it.
All right, so it's disposable income, right?
Right.
Ernesto would pay $10, Jamila would pay, right? And this is not like a once a month type of thing, right? You typically do your laundry, I hope you do, like once a week or something, right? You have a lot of clothes to fold when you're older, have a family, and you maybe have like 4 or 5 people to fold clothes for. So building this machine, think about it, right? Like building this machine that's on the screen right now would cost a lot of money. So how can you test this without building this machine first?
Just how you did, ask if we would use it.
Yeah, but asking is different than people's behavior, right? So how do you think, we can take surveys and I could go out and survey people. And in case any of you are interested, Mackenzie will fold your laundry for pay, is what she's saying right now. So you can offer to fold people's clothes for them, right? And see like if the value's there, right? Say like, listen, I'm not gonna charge you anything. I just wanna see how much value you think you're getting out of this, right? What else? What else?
I'd post it on Facebook Marketplace and with the same thing, just offering to fold people's clothes for them for really cheap.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you just test it out and see if people would hire you.
Yep.
I want to show you guys something because this is really interesting, and I think we may have talked about this, the flip fold. So this woman was, where am I at, right? This woman was just I think she was a stay-at-home mom, if I'm not mistaken, and her sons went off to college, and she knew that if she didn't, she was worried that their clothes were just going to pile up in the corner of the room, right? So she sent them off to college with this piece of cardboard and duct tape, right? And this sort of goes along the lines of like an unintentional MVP, right? But she came and talked to us. Oh, I'm gonna mute it. There's some reverb. But she came and talked to me when I was in college to come talk to our class, and it was a really interesting story because she built an MVP, sent it off to college with her kids. Had no idea what she was like. She was, building something that other people would want. She was just trying to help her kids have folded, neat clothes, right? And when her kids came back from college, she realized that there was a huge demand for something like this, right? And all she did was start with 4 pieces of cardboard, just like this, and duct tape, right? That's it. And she created a folding machine that turned into this, or branded, I think there's a branded one down, yeah, right? That turned into the flip fold, right? And made her a millionaire. So how did she test it? Simple and easy and basically with no cost. You have that? Jamila? You actually have a flip fold?
My friend bought one of them because she's really OCD about how her clothes are folded.
Sweet, right? So you actually like this is what's really impressive to see is that it spans generations. It's not just moms worried about their kids. It's young people to older people, men, women alike. Everybody feels this need. And she wasn't even aware of it, right? And how does she start? With a piece of cardboard and tape? That's crazy, right? That's an MVP. That's one of the greatest examples of an MVP that that I've ever found, right? Yeah, so she's right. Jamila's right. They use them at work all the time. They're very popular in retail stores. She said that that was one of her largest uh, customers. Were actual, like, you go to a mall, everybody in a mall are folding clothes, and you'll see a majority of them using flip folds. Does he have a lizard? My cat just ran in with a lizard in his mouth. Sorry, got sidetracked. So this is a great example of what we're talking about now, and especially in terms of folding clothes, right? Which this example is. Good. Oh, that's a big lizard. Yeah. Like to keep the lizards at bay on the back porch, so we send the cats out there, and every once in a while they bring them in the house. So apologize for that. All right, so next, creating a software MVP, right? We can do this by wireframing a website, which is much easier to do now. We actually have our students do this in the design class. We can use tools like SketchUp or Balsamic, but really what the most functional app development or app prototyping tool is Marvel App, right? You can use the pictures or grab free photos. Have I ever showed you AutoDraw? Did we look at AutoDraw? Right? Oop. So watch this. This is what's cool. So if I draw something like this, right? It guesses what I'm trying to draw, and I have a mermaid, right? So if you're looking for logos, this is an easy way our students have used to make logos. And then what you can do is save it, go to place it. Oops, that's not right. Forget the name of it. Oh, placeit.net. There we go. Let's see if this is correct. Yeah. And you can actually grab pictures of what your logo would look like on shirts and things like that, right? And you can grab those pictures and throw them on a mock-up site or a mock-up app or something like that, and show people like, oh, wow, I'm creating a clothing company. This is what the designs look like, and people are wearing them around, you know? So there's tons of ways to do a very cheap version of what your software is going to look like, right? Or your company is going to look like. And the prototyping software is what we just showed you, right? And then you can record your screen while clicking through an app and give people sort of a walkthrough of what it should feel like. You guys following me on this? Does this help at all in having you understand? No, okay, cool. Because this stuff's really exciting, and this is what we cover in the design class, because we think it's important to give you as many resources as possible in trying to help you, you know, get something off the ground as quickly as possible, right? So you can use social media to direct people to a landing page, right? Create a simple ad on Facebook. And Facebook really allows you to MVP out your marketing campaigns, right? With something that we refer to as A/B testing, right? So you can take an ad that you've designed, right? Say you have two pieces of copy, which is just the text on an ad. You want to see how each version plays, right? And you have two different photos or two different videos that you want to test. You can run 3 or 4 ads at the same time, see which ones work best, and then eliminate the ones that don't, right? Instead of just throwing all of your eggs in a basket on one ad and it doesn't work out, what happens? We have to go back to the drawing board. So we call it A/B testing. We can test both of those ads with similar markets and see which one performs better in real time and get that feedback almost immediately so we can make decisions on the fly instead of waiting for information and data to come in, right? So you use social media, you build a couple ads, you shoot them to a landing page, and at that point you collect their people's information, their email addresses, you do some pre-orders, you allow them to pre-order your product, which is what a lot of our students who have gone through the Runway program have done. And it's a very simple way to not even have a physical product, but show that so many people are interested in purchasing that they've already given you money to reserve whatever it is you're selling early, right? So you can build a marketing campaign, a landing page, collect people's information, use a database tool like Airtable, use Wix to create the landing page or the site, create Facebook ads. You can do all of this for free and prove that there's a market for your business, right? So that's really what we want to get across here is the idea of going as lean as possible. That's why we call it your minimum viable product, right? It's not big, it's not robust, it's not a finished, polished end thing, right? It's just as simple as you can get to prove that there's a market for your product or service, right? Okay, so Dropbox used an explainer video. Actually, let me go back and I think it might be in the notes. Yeah, let's see if we can find that. So here's Dropbox's minimum viable product, and they ended up getting, I think, 5,000 or 50,000 users from this, or 10,000 users, something like that, right?
You've been there. You're about to buy lunch and realize your wallet is in your other pants. Or maybe you left your keys at home. The problem is organization. You need one place for everything, like a magic pocket. Putting something in the magic pocket means it's always there, no matter what you wear or where you are. The same thing is true for computers. If you have more than one, keeping track of all of your files can be a pain. Solving this problem is one of the big ideas behind Dropbox. It's like a magic pocket, a single, secure place for all of your stuff. Let's meet Josh, who is preparing for a big trip to Africa. Right now, all of his trip info is spread across his laptop, desktop, and phone. He needs to consolidate it all and is tired of having to email files to himself or move them around with a USB drive. Then he found Dropbox, which creates a new kind of folder on his computers. These folders work hard to be exactly alike, even across Macs and PCs. By adding his itinerary to his laptop Dropbox, he can be sure the same file will show up in his desktop Dropbox and even on his phone. The same thing happens when he saves a document in a Dropbox folder. The document gets updated across all of his Dropboxes. But it's not just his computers. The Dropbox website also works to be exactly like his other Dropboxes. Anything he puts in Dropbox is available on the website automatically. This way, if his Jeep takes a dive and his computer is ruined, he can still get to his files on the Dropbox website, where they're always backed up. As it turns out, Josh's Safari was a success, and his laptop made it home with lots of videos and photos to share. Instead of emailing everything, he just shared a Dropbox folder with his mom, so she could get copies of photos she wants to frame. Because it worked so well for travel, Josh made Dropbox the home for all of his stuff, so it's accessible anytime, wherever he goes. Whether you're traveling the world, running a business, or simply organizing your life, Dropbox means you can stop worrying about managing files and backups and get on with your next adventure. You can download Dropbox now at Dropbox.com.
So what do you guys think? Anybody? How many of you use Dropbox?
I use it minimally, but I would like to get it integrated with all my stuff.
All right. So this helped them. Oh, so it is here, right? They got 5,000 users based off of this. Who's talking?
No, my watch Alexa went off on, or
Oh.
not Alexa, Siri.
Gotcha. But yeah, so we use it for everything. All of our information is stored in Dropboxes. for the School of Entrepreneurship, so we can all access it wherever we are, whenever we want to, right? But in the beginning, this was their MVP, and they got 5,000 people to subscribe right off the bat, right? And you see, like Elena said, the video does well at explaining how valuable it is, right? It does well at explaining like what they do, right? Because this was, imagine this being a brand new concept. The world of cloud computing was sort of in its infancy and coming into its own back in, I think this is in 2009 or something like that. Maybe even before that, but it's people were not familiar with it like we are now. We say, okay, Dropbox, iCloud, Box, like whatever, like we always, like Google Drive. We keep all of our documents and we communicate more than ever through cloud software, right? But back then, nobody knew what it was, right? So how do you create that learning? How do you facilitate that learning that allows somebody to feel comfortable using something like this, right? And that's how you do it. You relate it to, that's what's so beautiful about this. Not just like you going on a trip and having a good time, but now it's related back to your family, right? You want to share stuff with your mom, right? If you're going to get the older demographic involved in something like this, that's a little more technically advanced, right? Use the fact that now your kids can share pictures with you whenever they want, and it doesn't matter how much space you have because it's stored somewhere else and you can access them anytime you want, right? It helps to psychologically get people bought into something. They did a fantastic job of this. But this was their first MVP, right? It's absolutely brilliant. So we can create then not just software MVPs, but hardware MVPs, right? And this is really great because this is one of my favorite TED Talks. This is Pranav Mistry from Sixth Sense Technology. And we're gonna watch this and we'll talk about it afterwards, but really think about the tech. This is from 2009. So really think about the technology that he was trying to get together and use, and how he had this idea and how he began to test it, okay?
We grew up interacting with the physical objects around us, and there are enormous number of them that we everyday use. Unlike our most computing devices, these objects are much more fun to use with. When you talk about objects, one another thing automatically comes attached to that thing, and that is gestures, how we manipulate these objects, how we use this object in everyday life. We use gestures not only to interact with these objects, but we also use to interact with each other. Like gesture of namaste, maybe to respect someone, or maybe in India, I don't need to teach a kid that this means sport and cricket. It comes as a part of our everyday learning. So I'm very interested from beginning that how can our knowledge about everyday objects and the gestures and how we use this object can be leveraged to our interaction with the digital world. Rather than using a keyboard and mouse, why can I not use my computer in the same way that I interact in the physical world? So I started this exploration around 8 years back, and it literally started with a mouse on my desk. Rather than using that for computer, I actually opened it. And most of you might be aware that in those days, the mouse used to come with a ball inside, and there are 2 rollers that actually guides the computer that where the ball is moving and accordingly where the mouse is moving. So I was interested in these 2 rollers, and I actually wanted more. So I borrowed another mouse from a friend, never returned him, and I have now 4 rollers. What interestingly I did with these rollers is basically I took them off from these mouses and then put in a one line. It has some strings and pulleys and some springs. And what I got is basically a gesture interface device that actually acts as a motion sensing device made out of $2. So here, whatever movement I do in my physical world is actually replicated inside the digital world just using this small device that I made around 8 years back, 2000. Because I was interested in integrating these two worlds, I thought of sticky notes. I thought, why can I not connect the normal interface of physical sticky note to our digital world? A message written on a sticky note with my mom on a paper can come to my an SMS, or maybe a meeting reminder automatically syncs with my digital calendar, and a to-do list automatically syncs with you. But you can also search in the digital world, or maybe you can write a query saying what is Dr. Smith's address, and this small system actually prints out. So it actually acts as the paper input-output system, just made out of paper. In one another exploration, I thought of making a pen that can draw in 3 dimensions. So I implemented this pen that can help designers and architects not only think in 3 dimensions, but they can actually draw so that it's more intuitive to use that way. Then I thought, why not making a Google map, but physical one? Rather than typing a keyword to find something, I put my objects on top of that. If I put a boarding pass, it will show me where is your flight gate. A coffee cup will show you where you can find more coffee, or where you can press that stuff. So this was some of the earlier explorations I did, because the goal was to connect these two worlds seamlessly. Among all these experiments, there was one thing very common. I was trying to bring a part of the physical world to the digital world. I was taking some part of the objects or anything intuitiveness of the real life and bringing them to digital. Because the goal was to make our computing interfaces more intuitive. But then I realized that we humans actually are not interested in computing. What we are interested is in information. We want to know about things. We want to know about dynamic things going around. So I thought about last year, in the beginning of the last year, I started thinking that why can I not take this approach in reverse way? Maybe how about I take my digital world and paint the physical world with that digital information? Because pixels are actually right now confined in these rectangular devices that fits in our pocket. Why can I not remove this confine and take that to my everyday objects, everyday life, so that I don't need to learn the new language for interacting with those pixels? So in order to realize this dream, actually I thought of putting a big size of the projector on my head. I think that's why it's called head-mounted projector, isn't it? I took it very literally and took my bike helmet, put a little bit cut over there so that project actually fits nicely. So now what I can do, I can augment the world around me with this digital information. But later I realized that I actually wanted to interact with those digital pixels also. So I put a small camera over there that acts as a digital eye. Later we moved to a much better consumer-oriented pendant version of that many of you are now knowing as Sixth Sense device. But the most interesting thing about this particular technology is that you can carry your digital world with you wherever you go with you. You can start using any surface, any wall around you as an interface. The camera is actually tracking all your gestures, whatever you are doing with your hands, it's understanding that gesture. And actually, if you see, there are some color markers that in the beginning version we were using over there. You can start painting on any wall, that you stop by a wall and start painting on that wall. But we are not only tracking here one finger. We are giving you the freedom of using all the both of hands. So you actually can use both of your hands to zoom into or zoom out a map just by pinching operation over here. The camera is actually doing just getting all the images, doing the age recognition and also the color recognition, and like so many small algorithms are going inside. So technically it's a little bit so complex, but it gives you an output which is more intuitive to use in some sense. But I'm more excited that you can actually take it outside. Rather than getting your camera out of your pocket, you can just do the gesture of taking a photo and it takes photo for you, right? Thank you. And later I can find a wall, anywhere a wall, and start browsing these photos. Or maybe, okay, I want to modify this photo a little bit and send it as an email to a friend. So we are looking for an era where computing will actually merge with the physical world. And of course, if you don't have any surface, you can start using your palm for simple operation. I'm dialing a phone number just using my hand. Yep. The camera is actually not only understanding your hand movements, but interestingly, it's also able to understand what objects you are holding in your hand. What we are doing here is actually, for example, in this case, the book cover is matched with so many thousands of or maybe millions of books online and checking out which book it is. Once it has that information, it finds out more reviews about that, or maybe New York Times had a sound overview on that, so you can actually hear on a physical book as a review of a sound.
James talk at Harvard University.
This was Obama's last visit last week to
Thank you,
MIT.
MIT. And particularly, I want to thank two outstanding MIT.
So I was seeing the live of his talk outside in just a newspaper. Your newspaper will show you live of your weather information rather than having updated like you have to check your computer in order to do that, right? When I'm going back, I can just use my boarding pass and to check, oh, my flight has been how much delayed. Because at that particular time, I'm not feeling of opening my iPhone and checking out a particular icon. And I think this technology will not only change the way, yes, it will change the way we interact with people also, not only the physical world. The fun part is like I'm going to Boston Metro and playing Pong game inside the train on the ground, right? And I think the imagination is the only limit of what you can think of when this kind of technology merging with the real life. But many of you argue actually that all of our work is not only about physical objects. We actually do all lots of accounting and paper editing and all those kind of things. What about that? And many of you are actually excited about the next generation tablet computers to come out in the market. So rather than waiting for that, I actually made my own and just using a piece of paper. So what here I did is remove the camera, all the cameras, webcam have a microphone inside that camera. I removed that microphone from that and then just pinch that, like just make a clip out of that microphone and clip that to a piece of paper, any paper that you found it on. So now this sound of the touch is exactly getting me when exactly I'm touching the paper. But the camera is actually tracking where my fingers are moving. You can, of course, watch movies.
Good afternoon. My name is Russell, and I am a wilderness explorer in Tribe 54.
And you can, of course, play games. Here, the camera is actually understanding how you're holding the paper and playing the car racing game. Many of you already must have thought, okay, you can browse. Yeah, of course, you can browse to any website. So you can do all sort of computing on a piece of paper wherever you need it. So, but more interestingly, I'm interested that how we can take that in a more dynamic way. When I come back to my desk, I can just pinch that information back to my desktop so that I can use my full-size computer. And why only computers? We can just play with papers. Like paper world is interesting to play with. So here I'm taking a part of a document and putting over here the second part of from second place, and I'm actually modifying the information that I have over there. Yeah, and then I'm saying, okay, this looks nice. Let me print it out that thing. So I have a now printout of that thing, and now so the workflow is more intuitive the way that we used to do before, maybe 20 years back, rather than now switching between these two worlds. So as a last thought, I think that integrating information to our everyday objects will not only help us to get rid of the digital divide, the gap between these two worlds, but will also help us in some way to stay human, to be more connected to our physical world. And it will actually help us not end up being machines sitting in front of another machine. So that's all. Thank you.
All right, so what do you guys think? Thoughts. There's a couple interesting things with it. First, how did he create the MVP for what began this whole journey, which resulted in this company called Sixth Sense? How did he build it? Oh. Getting chats. Nobody wants to talk. Yeah, right? So he did it with a mouse. He took apart a mouse. He built a head-mounted display. He did all this stuff for just a few dollars, right, to see how it would work. And eventually it did. What else is interesting about this? How many of you, like, what are your opinions on the technology? Do you think it's useful? Too much? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that, Ernesto? What is going on? Nobody wants to talk? Nobody's going to say anything? It's also interesting, it tries to make things easier that are already pretty immersive, right? So this was way ahead of its time, right? This was 2009 that this dude was talking about doing this, right? What ever happened to this? So it's interesting to go and look and see. I don't think the company is actually. I don't think the company is actually in. Yeah, I don't think it's being developed any longer, right? This is a great example of testing ideas before you decide to take them to market. You're right, Ernesto. All right. So why? That's a great example. They tested the ideas and everybody was wowed, right? But why? Why didn't Google Glass or all of the augmented reality systems, Nintendo Wii, all of this kind of stuff? Why haven't they taken off? Why do you think? So Elena says if it got improved and evolved, it would be really cool. This was 2009, so this is 11 years ago. Where are we at now? They've had a lot of time to improve it. Where are we at now? You guys can unmute yourselves and talk. I feel like I'm talking to myself here. Where's the association with this, right? These are radical products. Right? What association or reference point do we have as consumers to associate with this now technology that takes us from, in 2009, the iPhone had just been out for 2 years, right? So we were just getting used to that. And now, forget the phone, I could just wear this pendant around my neck and interact with the world by playing Pong on subways. Like, this is insane, right? So there was no bridge between the technology that existed at that time and what they were trying to do with this, right? This again, like, sort of supports our theory that radical products rarely, if ever, work. It's cool as hell, right? It's really cool to listen to this guy and see what he can do. But in terms of the learning curve and understanding this, it's really, really advanced, right? And there is no reference point for any of us to say like, oh yeah, I get this because I'm already using this, right? So keep that in mind. And the technology, like, this is one of those sort of vanity metric, self-fulfilling things, right? You take it out in public and people are completely amazed, right? But then if you ask them, like, do you want to use it? They're like, no, I'm okay, right? Yeah, Elena, that's what we're talking about. So it would be better to make small steps towards something like this than just walk around and say, because he said we built the pendant as a consumer-facing device, right? As a consumer device, right? Because they wanted to get into the consumer market. They wanted to build something that the mass, target audience that they had would buy, and it never took off, right? Because phones did what this is doing, right? We had all the information we could possibly think of at our fingertips. Now we've evolved to wearable technology, right? What are the next steps? Eventually we'll get to a point where something like this might be relevant, right? But we don't all want to wear necklaces with cameras on them, right? That's intrusive into like our style, right? How many of you would wear a big pendant that had a camera on it, right? Why not just carry your phone that you can put in your pocket and take pictures with that, right? See, yeah, Megan, hell no. I feel like most people would feel the same way. So the Snapchat glasses are the same. So same thing with Google Glass, same thing with the Microsoft's HoloLens, right? Same thing with Magic Leap, the augmented reality software. All of these platforms launched, right? Yeah, GoPro, right? But GoPro was just built, like the GoPro's not doing too hot because they've never really innovated or grown. They just keep building the same camera and releasing it, right? I have a GoPro. I think it's great. When I go diving, I use it. It's awesome. But if you look at GoPro's scale, right, they took off, right? They hockey sticked right out of the gate, and then they never really innovated, right? Because the guy's idea was, what do you call those types of sports? Extreme sports athlete, like he was a snowboarder, surfer, all that kind of stuff. And it has not aged well, Ernesto. You're absolutely right. GoPro stock is tanked. But that's another good example, right? But GoPro we had an association with. That's why it was able to take off, right? We went from big, I remember my dad had this shoulder-mounted video camera when we were kids, right? To these small little handheld ones that are probably no more than maybe about 5 or 6 inches long, right? To a smaller one that is that records in high definition, that has all these different stabilizers so you can take slow motion video. Like there's association with that, right? And that product had in the beginning had done very well. But something like this where there's no, I look at it and I'm like, I get it, like it's cool, but how am I going to use that? How is that going to make my life easier and better? I'm going to have to learn a whole new technology. That's wild, right? And that's why you've seen video games move back towards the handheld. Like the Switch now is no different than like a Game Gear or Game Boy was. The only difference is you can switch it from TV to mobile to whatever, right? It's a much more associative type of device. You guys follow me on this? Do you agree? Let me know, because this is always an interesting conversation to have with students. Cool. So when you start coming up with MVPs and you start developing ideas, you want to, this is why we use lean launch, right? This is why we use that lean launch canvas, because we take all solutions that exist in the space, we find out what's wrong with the current solutions that people are using, and we solve those smaller problems. And we make our solution just a little bit better than what's out there, so people have a much lower barrier to adopt it, right? There's not a lot of switching costs. There's not a lot of learning. We're solving these smaller problems so people can adopt our solution much more easily, right? Without even thinking. Maybe Apple will, right? And to be honest with you, Luke, like this is something I've always been interested in, because Microsoft has made the leap, Google's made the leap, Amazon's making the leap. You've never really heard about Apple and virtual reality or augmented reality, right? Until very recently, they've started investing some money in it. But I've always been interested to know what Apple's take would be on that, in that market. And maybe they're smart, right? Because we know now that first movers, people who are first to market, have a higher rate of failure than people who are second or third. So maybe they're seeing how Google and Amazon and all these other big players fare, and what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, and eventually Apple slides in and creates something like like they've done historically, right? They didn't create the first MP3 player, they didn't create the first smartphone, they didn't create the first tablet, They just made everything better, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how they eventually make their way into something like this, because I agree with both of you, both you and Elena, Luke. This is something that will probably be around sooner rather than later, but there needs to be that association that people have with it in order for it to be adopted on mass scale, right? Because if there's no, if it's just such a strange, far out type of technology, it's going to be much more difficult for people to buy into it. All right, let's get moving now. Cool. So these are other ways you can do it, right? You can use, so here's another example that's free for students, right? This is what we teach in our design class. I think this is right. Yeah, so here's Fusion 360. You can download it for free as a student. You need to Google Fusion 360 for students, I think. Yep, free software for students. So you can download this for free, and it's an incredibly intuitive software that allows you to design in 3 dimensions, okay? And it's really helpful when you have an idea for a product or something along those lines, right? Because you can literally, you can build out what you want it to look like. There's a learning curve, but there's actually some great, they have some really great resources. Oh, there we go, learn support, that's where it is. If you go in here and you go into self-paced learning, and this right here, this getting started in Fusion 360 will walk you through everything. And it doesn't take too long. Maybe a couple hours you spend, you'll have a basic knowledge of how to create designs in all 3 dimensions. And it's wonderful that this is available to you. And it's much easier to use than systems of the past. So definitely check that out if you're interested in building an actual product. And this is what we use in design class because at the end of it, we can actually take your 3D models and print them on our 3D printers. So it's pretty sweet to actually have something to like hold on to say like, okay, this is what I've designed and this is what I want to build. So this is just the system and what it looks like and what you can do. The more advanced you get, obviously, the more detail you can bring to the table with it. But ultimately, what we're looking for is just a basic design of something so people could get the feel for what it looks like. When I taught high school, I had students who were interested in building wristbands for students instead of the IDs they had to wear around their neck. So when students walked in a room, they'd scan their wristband and it would automatically take attendance. We literally built these wristbands that could fit RFID chips on them in a 3D printer that was no more than a 1 foot by 1 foot like desktop printer. And it was really cool because the students got to use them and show people what they were trying to articulate in a presentation. Like, here's actually what we want to do. So it's super helpful. Another way to get an MVP off the ground is using Kickstarter. This is down the road, right? You can get the idea tested before you start going and asking people for money. But Kickstarter is great, right? You set a goal for what you'd like to raise, and you set different tiers for what people can offer you. And you have to give them, you have to provide them with something for the money that they give you. So $5 might be a letter from the CEO thanking them for their donation, or a button that says, I contributed to the X arm, right? All the way up to $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 might get you the first run of a product, or give you more input into how the product's designed or something like that. But Kickstarter is a great way to raise capital through the crowdfunding world for a prototype or an MVP. You can outsource it. I've had a few students do this with some success. Upwork, Fiverr, 99 Designs, Logo Tournament. These are all sites that allow you to use independent contractors from around the world to design websites, apps, logos, all that kind of stuff, right? So I want to talk about this for a little bit, just because I want to ask, like, what are some of the advantages you think exist with this, and then what are some of the disadvantages? So let's start with advantages. What do you think? How do you think this works well for entrepreneurs? All right, saves you time. How so? And how else? How else do you think this really helps entrepreneurs? All right, tons of resources. You're paying someone else to do it, and typically, are you paying them the going rate of hiring a programmer or a software engineer? What do you think? Much less. Yeah, man, it's a lot less. I have a student who had her virtual reality simulations built for like $3,000. Money that she got through the Runway program, which is very, very a lot less than what it would have cost to hire a software engineer, right? And you're right, the skills may vary, so that could be a disadvantage, right? What else? What other advantages? Let's stick there. What other advantages do you think exist? Anybody? Be nice to hear a person's voice. Feeling kind of lonely here. Still nothing? No one's gonna do it? Man, this is a tough gig.
Tough crowd.
Oh, thank you. Oh my God, there is somebody else on there.
I was eating, that's why, and I didn't want to.
I thought you guys had just designed a bunch of bots to just play the role of humans while you guys did whatever you wanted and sat on the computer. Yeah, so we're looking for advantages. What about, all right, so we find the advantages, right? It's available right now. I could go on Upwork and I could give my design or my idea for a design to people and have them give me feedback immediately, right? I could get it done within a day or two. What are some of the disadvantages?
The work that you want done may not be up to par.
Okay, so like you said, the skills may vary, so you can't really control the end result as much as you would like if you bring everything in-house and you partner with somebody who can do the design. What else? Else are some of the disadvantages? I can speak to these because I've done this before. I outsourced design of a site once, and it was a bit of a pain. The guy that I outsourced to was in Croatia, and I don't know what the time difference is, but it's substantial. If they don't want to talk to you anymore, there's no way of getting a hold of them, right? And you have to be able to link up when you're both are free, and that's a difficult situation to be in, right? So you need to be careful with this because it does cost a fair amount of money, but it's also operating on the same system as like Uber or Airbnb where people are reviewed. So the only way they make money is if they get good reviews, which keeps them in check and makes them deliver product or projects on time. It pushes them, encourages them to be really vocal and communicative with you. And it's gotten a lot better since I used it. I've seen a lot of students use this and have it work very well for them. But just keep it in the back of your mind. It's not all good, but it does give you a quick way to get something on paper. Okay, good. All right, so let me stop sharing. Cool. Does anybody have any questions about anything that we've covered so far?
I have
a talkative class. I appreciate it, everybody. Oh boy, I guess my snarkiness has encouraged you to stay even more silent. All right, so what we're gonna do is link up next week. You guys have a good rest of your week and stay safe over the weekend. Next Tuesday, we'll get started on finance. We only have 4 classes left, so we'll try and get through everything and get the review done before the final hits during finals week, the week of the 28th, I think, 27th or 28th. Okay, so you guys all be well, and I will talk to you next week, okay?
Will you really quick go over what the assignment is for tonight? Let's do today.
Yes.
Assignment 7.
Assignment 7. Let me pull it up. I know it says that it's an honors research project, but you still have to do it. That should be changed, right? So you're going to research startup ecosystems and answer the questions below. I know it says APA. I would like it formatted just nicely. Like I said, I don't really know what APA looks like, so you can just do it to the best of to the level at which you think is appropriate as an adult to hand something in. So it should be 3 pages. And yeah, just answer the questions and you should be good to go.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, everybody good? Have a good weekend, and I'll see you all next week. Okay? Thank you, guys.
See you next week.
All right.